Now I want to talk about, I had a video just a little while ago about creating pockets in old fields and using a base of switchgrass and how you can explode wildlife populations, let alone whitetail populations. But you know what, folks? That's an original concept of mine that I've been able to apply to just about any wildlife habitat out there, including switch. So I want you to think of the switch. It's all around me. You can see the switch beyond in the valley. We're on a client parcel from Minnesota here, and they've done a great job installing this, and now they're going to that next step, which is adding those diversity pockets. But I want you to look at this switch right here, and I want you to be able to understand this and visualize this. This doesn't matter if this is a big area, 10 to 12 acres of white pine, white spruce, red cedar, autumn olive, honeysuckle, even getting some of those quote bad invasives in there. All of those equal a bedding base, a cover base, a base of structure that you can actually build a wildlife population on, because they're not falling down during the middle of winter. Right now this is February 17th. And so we're right out here in the middle of the winter. You can see the snow. We couldn't even drive the truck out here because there's too much snow. We had to take the side by side. And this cover is still standing. So any switchgrass out, any pheasants, any rabbits, any deer, they still have this cover out here. Something they don't have though within the middle of this is daytime browse. They don't have that hardwood regeneration, briars, broadleafs, shrub tips that they can feed on and that they require during their bedding hours. And pheasant and rabbits need that edge, and they need those food sources too. They have to have diversity, and something you can easily apply. Now switchgrass, I talked about that in the previous video. You take this area, and it's going to be the same percentages for anything, but you're going to take 40 to 50% of this area, and that's what the landowner is doing this year. And he's going to kill this grass. He's going to kill any grass that's in here, because if it's not switchgrass, it's not cover, and if it's grass, it's not food. So what the deer are lacking in this area, and the critters, birds, they need diversity. And so he's going to actually take some of the cuttings from John Walton from big rock trees up in Chippewa Falls. He's going to put some red osier dogwood, some hybrid poplar in here, some willow, and then he's going to let some native regeneration take place. He might even throw a few conifers back here. But bottom line is, he's going to create pockets in this stand and the stand across the ravine over there, 1/8 of an acre, 1/4 acre pockets at most, because we're only dealing with about 5, 6, 7 acre pure stands. And they're going to create pockets in here. In this area, there might be 10 to 12 pockets. And those are going to be those non-grass. It's going to total about 40 to 50% of the area. So if this is 7 acres, you're going to have 3.5 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres in those pockets. And that's going to offer that diversity and edge that wildlife require, let alone whitetails. Now, let's imagine a big stand of conifers. They have red cedar eradication projects down in Missouri and southern Iowa, some of those areas, and other areas too. And what I'll see is, I've seen people take an entire field of red cedar away, and then they tree tube it with hardwoods that would have offered little to no wildlife value. And then 5 years later, it's just a bunch of hardwoods growing. It looks like a nursery, and there's no wildlife, and that's about it. Folks, please don't do that. Instead, you can take those red cedars, you cut out 40 to 50 to 60%, put them into pockets just like we're doing right here. Spray the red cedar out when it comes in and grows. Spray any kind of grass, because grass and red cedar are the same concept. They're the same type of variety, meaning that there's no food. It's just a base cover. And then try to get hardwood regeneration, shrub tips, briars, just like we're trying to grow out here. If there's leftover clover, alfalfa, little remnants of forbs and forages, that's awesome too. And then also broadleaf weeds. And so imagine the same concept applied to a stand of red cedars. I've taken this similar setting right here in a big stand of red pine that someone got state assistance in Michigan. And there's 30 acres of red pine that are useless for wildlife in just about any degree. No different than letting a bunch of autumn olive grow over a field. People will say, well, autumn olive, it destroys all the native habitat. Well, what do you think a bunch of red pine planted does? The only difference, red pine is for timber, and they're money trees, and a forester might recommend them, and they're native to Michigan, red pine is. So they'll say that's better. Actually, autumn olive is a better base cover because it has cover for food, cover for rabbits, cover for grouse, pheasant, and nesting for songbirds. So a little bit different level. That's a higher level, actually, wildlife cover, but no different. You're still taking those red pines where you want deer to bed. You're creating those pockets, those diversity pockets. Generally, even on a 30-acre field, you're not going over much larger than a ½ acre in size. And you're trying to create that regeneration of woody browse, non-grass, non-conifer, growing in those pockets. And it's the same concept whether you apply it to red pines, red cedar, white spruce, white pine, and again, a lot of overgrown fields that have autumn olive. The worst thing you do is destroy all that autumn olive and take that cover away from wildlife species. You're harming wildlife if you do that. I hope you understand that. You're hurting wildlife populations. You're not helping them. Autumn olive can be a great base cover. You go in there, mow out pockets where you want deer to bed within that area, a hidden corner or a large percentage of it. This is an area, obviously, the landowner is not walking through the switchgrass, so an area you're not walking through that autumn olive. You're creating those diversity pockets within, again, 40 to 50%. This is a concept I've been using for over a decade, 12 years, 15 years, where I've been encouraging clients of mine in the past, pine thickets, flanked by shrubs, flanked by switchgrass, early successional growth pockets. It's the same concept. I've been using it for many, many years, and it all goes back to the early 90s when I'd see 30 deer pour out of 5 acres in a swale with a bunch of willow in the Thumb area of Michigan where it's very flat. And I asked the local conservation forester that I was using to plant and buy 9,000 trees from over a 2-year period, how can I create these pockets? And he said, well, those are great for wildlife, but we can't give you cost share assistance because it's not creating boards per foot and it's not regenerating that income that goes back into the state of Michigan. So they're not going to give you money to plant something that's not going back into boards per foot. Wildlife restoration was not their focus. That was explained to me very hard in the 90s. So guess what? We just bought all our own trees. We didn't care about cost share assistance because we wanted to do it right for wildlife. I could care less about growing timber species trees. Same thing with autumn olive. You're not destroying the wildlife population. You're using the autumn olive as a cover base. You're putting the diversity pockets in, and then you're allowing a great diversity, true diversity. That's diversity. When you have a base of autumn olive, it's only 40–50% of the area, and then you're adding broadleafs, hardwood regeneration, broadleaf weeds, shrub tips. That's diversity. You're taking you don't want anything to be solid like this. This is, the deer are going to use the edge of this, the wildlife. But that's how you take a monoculture of deer habitat and wildlife habitat and you really put it on steroids. You really expand and explode the wildlife populations. I always talk about one of my favorite clients, Bob, in southwest Wisconsin, where he has a 30-acre switchgrass field. And his experience over the last 10, 12 years, however long it's been, 15 years, is that the wildlife use the edge, they don't use the center of that, and so he has 30 acres of nothing, basically 29 acres of nothing in the middle of that field that the deer don't bed in because there's no daytime browse. The pheasants need that edge cover, so they're on the outside. The rabbits are on the outside, and that's about it. So there's a big 30 acres almost of wasteland. Instead, you can take that monoculture, and again, imagine this as being a bunch of autumn olive, a bunch of white spruce, a bunch of white pine, red cedar, tag alder, whatever that monoculture is, gray dogwood in upland settings. That's just this big monoculture of gray dogwood. You have to go in and hollow out those pockets, spray the dogwood out. Add shrub tips that you can buy from cuttings from up at John Walton. He sells the hybrid poplars or red osier dogwood, sells those cuttings, willows. He sells all kinds of varieties that you can stab into the ground and get them to grow in those diversity pockets. Box elder seeds, red maple seeds, awesome to add to those diversity pockets, especially after you spray the grass out that's been a monoculture like the switchgrass. You left a lot of soil for those seeds to grow on. And that's how you take a monoculture and change it. And you know what? The same applies to hardwoods. So if you have a mature stand of hardwoods, how do you diversify that hardwoods? You take pockets out of it in the same size, same percentage. You allow a lot of sunlight to get in there, but you change the diversity. I encourage people to add 50 to 100 conifers per acre in those cuttings, in those pockets, in stands of hardwoods, because you're trying to diversify and change the complexity and diversity of that woods, not just all hardwoods, money trees. You want to actually change it for some wildlife value. You can do it with any monoculture habitat. Look at adding these pockets. And then the cool thing is, you can add a cruising trail for bucks, which is right back here in the stand location we just talked about. And that buck can cruise by in a layer of cover. He can scent check this entire field. He'd be on the downwind edge. He can scent check for 100 to 150 yards out. See if there's any bucks during the rut, or during does during the rut, any does that are entering estrus. And he can do that by going through the safe cover off to the side of this. And so adding trails around the outside edge of this that set up tree stand locations or blind locations or connect funnels, you're trying to match your cuttings and anything you do to the lay of the land. So you're not going to put diversity pockets in here on steep side banks. You're going to try to use the flat spots where deer will actually bed, and pretty easy to do. And again, I love matching it to the contour of the land, especially when you get into some of these hills, because you know exactly where they're going to bed in this field on those flat spots. You know where they're going to travel for travel corridors. Travel corridors you can create around the outside of this and set up a stand location, and you're just cutting it out. A DR brush trimmer, if you think of that, where it's only 30 inches wide. You go in there, mow it down. You can even spray it down to the dirt to kill it. Those deer relate to it. You're giving that buck that cruising trail, so you can scent check the outside of this. And when you put it all together in any kind of monoculture, whatever it is, when you're adding those trails and you're adding those pockets, you can easily dictate not only that deer are going to use it because they have the ultimate diversity that's better than just about any habitat you can plant singularly in a field or in a woods, but those bucks are going to cruise, and they're going to use those bedding areas, and then be on that downwind edge. You can connect funnels to those downwind edges, to other diversity pockets, to other fields, to food plots, and you know exactly where those bucks and deer are going to travel within those fields. And in the end, it's not just about the whitetails. It doesn't matter the setting, from hardwoods to switchgrass to autumn olive to conifers. You add those pockets and you're helping all wildlife in the area because of the true diversity. Again, more grass, just more grass. Don't let everyone tell you that that's diversity. Same with a bunch of pines and it's in a stand. It's just more conifer. So people say, well, add some spruce to it, add some cedar, that's diversity. No, folks, that's just more conifer. And see, if you don't have that edge and you don't have this diversity in it, then you're not accomplishing anything. Try this. Try changing a monoculture. Try doing it with these pockets. It's something I've been teaching for 12 to 15 years. It's an original concept of mine, and I hope you enjoy it. I know your wildlife will, and I know if you install it, you're going to really enjoy your hunt this fall.